that your voices are in our house constantly.
I apologize.
Nick's hanging out with his friends again. No, I like it. You have very soothing voices. Like it's Seth Rogen and the other girl. Yes, Nick is a religious listener.
Yeah,
he
know.
was really, really sweet about that. I mean, like I started to become my entire self-esteem became staked on will Nick tweet today about how wonderful we are,
and will Nick make it all the way to the end?
Yes. Will we lose him at any point? And
yeah,
we have not yet.
What couple
and he started
conversations
way back.
that?
Yeah, he went to the beginning. I mean, I don't know any other person who holds the trophy for having listened to every episode.
As far as I know,
you're
it's
the only
Nick.
one.
Yeah.
So you are our number one.
What do we win?
A no prize.
Gratitude. Our bottomless gratitude.
Yep.
I don't want that shit.
In love with movies, in love, in love,
Dani and Nic.
in love with movies. Da da da.
Welcome, movie lovers, to In Love with Movies.
I'm Dani.
And I'm Nic.
And this is In Love with Movies.
And what do we do
You
here,
just
Dani?
said that.
Yes, sure did.
And we talk about movies.
And the love.
Woo-hoo!
It's funny how that works. Air horns. And we are joined today by guests that I'm very excited to announce.
Wait. Nick is so excited.
Thanks. I appreciate it. They're like, literally, you all would have just heard them, making me blush about how much of a stan I am for these two. I discovered them sometime in the past year, and I genuinely, at this point, I was trying to rack my brain. I don't remember how, but I love what they do so much, and I have devoured all of their podcasts. They are the pair comic book couples counseling podcast, Brad and Lisa Gullickson. Welcome.
Hello.
Yay, thank you so much for having us.
Yeah. The pleasure is ours.
So Brad and Lisa are going to tell us a little bit more about themselves, but as a precursor as to why I was excited to have them. If you like what we do here,
they do it better.
I was literally going to say, and you also like comic books as much as you like movies, they do it better. They do what we do. They talk to each other the same way that we kind of talk to each other, except they do it with a higher production value where they actually edit things and they do extra homework where they, read through a whole self-help book and lay out sort of how that self-help book might help you in your relationship. And I have, in fact, incorporated some of those things just from Lisa's interpretations into our relationship. I've also made Danielle read some of those books with me that we've then talked about, and it has helped to build the bonds of our relationship. So if you like what we do, and you, like I said, go look through their feed, go find them, and pick a character that you know who the character is, and I promise you're in for a good time.
Oh,
I
that's
also
so sweet.
will say, Lisa, your hot takes are very similar to my hot takes. So I'm real pumped to discuss with you guys. We have very similar. Wouldn't you say we have very similar opinions?
Yes.
Like you guys just did your Dungeons and Dragons one, which I love that movie. I went in for the hot men.
Yes.
Yeah, nothing else but men, and it was great. Had a good time.
But it turned out even better than you expected.
It did. There was storyline and hot men. So it was great.
So Lisa, Brad, like we said, we're going to open up with a little bit of your own love story about yourself. So why don't you give us and our listeners a Cliff Notes version, explain what the nature of a relationship is, briefly how you found each other, how you ended up where you are now.
Yeah, who are you?
The nature of our relationship, it's sexual. It's also legal. We are married to each other.
Thank God. Woo!
Best
It
answer
is
to that question ever.
monogamous, so no guest appearances.
I remember the first day I met Lisa, I saw Lisa, and Lisa does not remember that day.
I don't.
There's that.
It's because Brad had mutton chops at the time, and mutton chops are the facial hair that do make you invisible to women.
That's correct.
Definitely.
It's
And they
that
were
scene
like
from
epic.
Scrubs with the ring. It just
They were so long. They were like Charles A. Adams. Very, very impressive mutton chops. Logan circa 1983. Yeah, I was really proud of those mutton chops. But no, we met because we both had jobs at the same Barnes & Noble bookstore in Reston, Virginia. Lisa was a bookseller, and I was hired on to be the bargain lead. Very, very important position, making sure that all the bargain books were pyramided correctly. And after a few months of being a bargain lead, I was promoted because they saw that my pyramid skills were so intense and accurate. They said, why don't you manage the music department for a few years until CDs become irrelevant? And I said, yes, please.
We didn't really start hanging out, though, until Brad decided that he was moving to California.
To Los Angeles.
With his best friend to follow his dreams of making it in Hollywood. And so that started a series of Goodbye Brad going away parties.
So I started working at Barnes & Noble in 2006. And by mid 2007, it was time to hit the road and go to Los Angeles. And yes, there were several goodbye parties. I made some good friends at that store.
He's a charismatic guy, especially among a bunch of like book nerds. Like he was a good get. So we started hanging out at those parties. And then we discovered quickly that we didn't actually enjoy the company of a lot of the other booksellers, but we really enjoyed each other's company.
That's not 100%.
They're all listening to this podcast.
Yeah, don't worry. Every single one of them is a subscriber.
Sam, you guys know Sam. He's like, what? I thought Brad loved me.
No, I loved Sam. Sam was one of my faves.
But then we started dating.
No, hold on. You tell this story terribly.
Oh, excuse me.
We're seeing that post 8:30 forms of communication.
Yes. One of those goodbye parties was at what's that pizzeria? Was it Uno's? What was over at the Reston Town Center?
That was Uno's.
It was Uno's. We were at Uno's, and I was complaining about my glasses because I was going to LA and I knew I needed more fashionable glasses than the ones that I had.
Obviously.
I had to look hip and cool in LA, and I had these huge, like, monster lenses on my face. It was like,
it's like a dad in the 80s.
Yeah, it was like a dad in the 80s.
To match your mutton chops. You had to have big glasses to balance it out. I understand.
Were you taking the mutton chops to LA?
No, I had shaved them off by that point. I actually had several employees at Barnes & Noble properly groom me over the course of that year from 2006 to 2007, where they would tell me that my hair had too much product in it. You got to get rid of that. And they said, you got to get rid of those mutton chops and you got to dress better. And I followed all those instructions, and I became attractive to Lisa.
Finally, he was on my radar.
Yes. And so we were at Uno's, and I was talking about how I needed new glasses. And you said, well, I'll go help you select new glasses. And I was like, wait, what? You're going to help me select new glasses?
That's
what does that mean?
I've ever heard anyone say.
Why would this lady want to help me pick out new glasses? Does she like me? That can't be. And then we went to the mall, Fair Oaks Mall. I'm going to give you the addresses of all the places.
If you want to do the Brad and Lisa tour.
You can do the tour. It's like going to Bangor, Maine, Stephen King, doing the IT tour.
Yeah.
But the Comic Book Couples Counseling tour.
Okay, well, the original Barnes & Noble is now a Container Store, so.
That is true. In Reston, you can go visit. So we were at Fair Oaks Mall, and we went, and you helped me select glasses that are very similar to the ones that I'm currently wearing.
They were Versace.
And they were Versace glasses. And I was just like, yeah, I can afford that. I can just buy some Versace glasses. I'm a baller. So I spent way too much money on those glasses. And then we went to Cheesecake Factory and had an awkward lunch date situation. And then we had an even more awkward hug outside our cars as we said goodbye. It was like, okay, goodbye. This is what people do. They touch each other when they like each other.
It's weird even now.
Yeah. And that, I guess, was technically date 1.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, now we're going to go through dates 2 through 75.
It makes me feel squidgy even to go back. Oh, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
So
date 1's good. Yes. And then now continue.
Okay. Finally, the time came when Brad packed up his car and he left for California.
Yes. And so we had gone on several dates before that. but we knew that I was leaving, so it was never going to be serious. And I'm driving across the country with my buddy Steve, and we're taking the long way. We went down south because we are big Alamo Drafthouse fans, so we wanted to go to Austin, Texas, and finally see a movie at the Alamo Drafthouse. The movie we saw was Spider-Man 3. Steve and I saw that there, and we had a great time at that Alamo Drafthouse. And then we drove up to Monument Valley, and then we went like a little catacorny. No, we went to Tombstone. Anyway, I'm not going to take you through the whole trip. We saw a lot of cool things in this country.
And Brad and I are texting the whole time.
And we're texting the whole time, and we're
the hard way, like where you have to like hit if you want to get a letter, you have to hit it.
Yeah, flip phone. And I'm also calling Lisa every night, and Steve and I are camping because we're cheap. And I guess I didn't really understand. Should I have named Steve?
There's lots of people named Steve. It could be anyone.
It could be anybody. Yeah. Anyway, I could tell that he was not happy with the amount of conversation I was having with Lisa on the road and at campsites. And by the time we got to Vegas, there was like this air between Steve and I that felt like that just created a distance between the two of us. And at one point he said, you know what, when we get to LA, I don't think we should be roommates. I was like, dude, we're driving across the country to go to LA and become rich and famous together. And now we're going to go to LA and we're going to find our own places. That's weird. And so I said, you know what? I'm not going to go to LA. I'm going to go back to Lisa.
Yeah.
And so I drove back to Lisa, and he and Steve went to LA. And this time, though, I decided to go all the way up to North Dakota. So I did this giant circle of the country and finally made my way back to Lisa. And then when I got back on June 5th, 2007, we became steady.
Yeah.
And now Steve is also known as Steve Jobs, who is one of the richest men in the world.
How old do you think they are?
I couldn't think of another famous Steve.
I was going to say Steve Rogers, who's not a real person.
Yeah, okay.
So
no, Steve did eventually also come back to Virginia because Virginia is where dreams of LA go to die.
Yeah.
But not dreams of Lisa. They go to live.
No,
I'm making dreams come true every day.
New dreams. New dreams.
That is literally the stuff of romance movies. Like that is a rom-com right there.
I have a question,
especially that it's very centered around the male and the female is just way in the background.
Lisa, that was my question. Can I hear your side of the story? What was the Lisa side of the story?
Well, I continued working at Barnes & Noble, and I remember I continued to go hang out with like the Barnes & Noble crew. And I remember one specific time where we were at Breakers, which was like this
bar in Herndon, Virginia.
That's right. That had pool. I can't play. And a guy there sent me a drink, which I was drinking a Long Island iced tea. And the last thing I needed was another Long Island iced tea. And then I was stuck chatting awkwardly with this guy. And he was so weird that I'm like, is he trolling me? He was like such a weirdo. And then I just remember going to Katie and going like, I miss Brad.
Oh.
So yeah. So while Brad was gone, I was kind of still dating, but my heart wasn't in it. I really liked Brad. I was happy he came back.
Yeah, I came back. And I remember being in Wyoming driving and calling up my old Barnes & Noble manager. His name was Freddie. I'm going to name them all. And I was like, Freddie, can I have my job back? Can I be music manager again? He's like, I already hired another guy. His name was Ed. And Ed's going to be the music manager. And I was like, well, who the hell is Ed? I don't know who that is. I'm sure I'd be better than him. And he's like, well, hold on. Let me figure things out. And then I came back. And he's like, well, what about you being music manager? Or no,
not music manager,
merchandise manager. Yeah. And I said, I'll be merchandise manager. And then I just rode that train of success all the way up to store manager of another Barnes & Noble and worked for Barnes & Noble for like 11 years.
Wow.
That's
Do you still work for Barnes & Noble?
I don't. I still like the company in some respects.
That's good.
We are not besmirching their name as much as we may be sort of besmirching Steve's.
Today's episode was brought to you by Borders.
True story. The reason I got a job at Barnes and Noble is because I loved Borders more. And at the time, I was in such a low place that I thought wherever I was going to work, I'd end up loathing it. So I'll go work for Barnes and Noble instead. And then I ended up really like falling in love with Barnes and Noble. And of course, falling in love at Barnes and Noble. So, you know, my love for both things grew.
Wow, that really is like a very rom-com, like bookstore, I'm turning back for the gal kind of thing. That's cute.
It was really
I like
sweet.
it.
My mom was super happy about it.
And then for our wedding, my sister was my maid of honor. And as her maid of honor speech, she read a performance review that Brad wrote for me at Barnes & Noble.
As a merch manager,
because
now dating Lisa. And Freddie was like, just don't tell people that you're dating. And I was like, but I can still write a review? Okay.
But you don't, like, when you get your review, you don't know which manager wrote it. And so I got this amazingly glowing review.
Shocking.
And I was so proud of it and that I gave it to my mom and she kept it. She was like, this is an amazing performance review. And so my sister read it.
You met standards.
I did. I met standards. As I do every day.
Wow, that's so cute. And how long ago? Well, I guess how long have you all been together now?
So that was 2007 was our first date.
Yeah, and
So
then we
that's
got married in
16
2009.
years. And then we got married in 2009. So we've been married for 14.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Almost 14.
Yeah,
almost
that's
14.
a long time.
Yeah. We
So by the
got
time
married
you
on
all
June 27th. There you go.
We're actually on each other's radar. You knew pretty quickly that you wanted to lock that down.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, certainly from my case, because no other girl had ever liked me before.
That's when you should, if you got to swoop in while their self-esteem is low. Just right when they're getting hot, well, their self-esteem is still low. That's when you swoop in. The second the mutton chops disappear, you're like, you're my guy.
Yeah, I created this. He got LASIK. He grew a beard. Like, we're doing a lot better. He eats healthier. His farts stink less.
Ooh.
Cleans up his toenail clippings. Like, I got the improved Nick. But I had to create
still
it.
working on that.
It's polishing off the edges, really.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to encourage anyone to think that they should or could change their partner in any meaningful way.
But you can adjust them.
You can be a really good example for them.
Oh, yeah.
Of a way to be a civilized person.
There you go.
So 14 years, as we said, married for 14 years.
Married for 14.
And
for 16.
you have a podcast called Comicbook Couples Counseling at CBCC. I know. How did that start?
So before Comic Book Couples Counseling, we had another podcast called In the Mouth of Dorkness,
which was more of like a panel podcast. We had two other good buddies doing the pod with us.
Their names were Brian and Darren.
Okay.
Real names. All real names.
All real names. And
you could probably actually go track down since we've now labeled it and Mouth of Darkness.
Yeah. Please. Yeah, please do. There's some good stuff in there. There's also probably some really terrible stuff in there. But I'm really, really proud of In the Mouth of Darkness. And we started that. Darren, myself, and my friend Matt started that podcast. And then Brian wormed his way in. And then Lisa
I slept my way onto the podcast.
Slept her way onto the podcast. And we loved that podcast. But as like a movie podcast with two other people, more personalities involved, a lot of different ideas,
more schedules involved.
I felt like it, we wanted to do something that was totally ours. And we talked about having our own podcast that we could guide and steer to our passion. And Lisa came up with the idea of Comic Book Couples Counseling, I believe, while we were out for a walk one day.
That's true.
And then it took like a year to actually execute.
Yeah. We talked about it for a year.
Yeah. And by execute, I mean hit record on a conversation.
Yeah.
But yes, Lisa at the time was really excited about Silver Surfer, the all-written slot comic.
Which is still my all-time favorite run of comics. I love it so much.
But why didn't we start our podcast covering that relationship, Dawn and Norin?
Because I wanted to save my favorite couple for when we had really honed the podcast and got, a couple of episodes on under our belt so we could really do it justice.
So we did 50 episodes, and then we eventually covered Norin and Dawn from Silver Surfer. Yeah.
But as Nick mentioned, we also pair the couple with a self-help book. So our actual first episode was one of Brad's favorite couples, Scott Summers and Jean Grey, and we paired them with the 5 love languages. And
it was just so much fun
Yeah.
to cover that relationship over 4 episodes, 4 different story arcs. We started with the Dark Phoenix saga, and we ended with Grant Morrison's New X-Men. And like, it was just so much fun that first month. We launched that in December of 2018. And I loved the idea, and I loved the name that Lisa came up with, Comic Book Couples Counseling, because you hear that and you go like, well, what is that? And it it doesn't sound like anything else in the comics conversation space. And almost immediately people responded positively. Well, in some cases, not so positively, because there are people who have very intense feelings about Scott Summers and Jean Grey. If you dare say anything different about them, they will let you know. So our first negative review was after, I think, the 2nd episode or the 3rd episode, and it was a really mad review. But people were writing reviews and looking out for us, and we had some success on In the Mouth of Darkness. Oh, we had some really great success
and some really rad guests
and opportunities, but nothing like what came out of Comic Book Couples Counseling. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a real
We found our
pleasure.
little home. We found our niche. So, and we're so happy to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you all do something very, not only unique, but I think genuine. And I think affords an opportunity to do, like I said, some of what we try to do in making, difficult conversations around relationships easier to have. I think, Lisa, you said on one of your episodes something to the effect of the comics become the language for having the more difficult discussions.
Yes. I honestly think that that's what stories are for. And I found like when I was talking movies and I was trying to be critical, that really wasn't what I was actually interested in. I was actually interested in, what is the theme of the movie? What is the movie trying to tell me? Does this movie actually have something to say? And so I wanted to figure out a way to talk about comics in a way that made me excited and really steered away from the, like, I don't know, being more critical, being more like, I don't know.
Well, no. I think that's is a key aspect of the podcast for me, is we're not saying Dark Phoenix Saga is a good comic or a bad comic. We're saying this is what the comic is. Let's explore what's happening within it and what it means for the couple. And then in pairing it with the self-help guide, a conversation starts to bubble up about our relationship. And so what are we finding in this story as it is presented? And so we have covered comics that some people would say are quote unquote bad comics, not good comics, but we still find things within those supposedly bad comics that are worthy of discussion and are actually helpful. And it also turned into this vibe of just celebration of the art form and how, the least interesting conversation you can have about something is whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I actually think that's, and I don't know that we have articulated it well enough. I don't know we've executed it well enough, but I do think that I couldn't have said this when we first started off our podcast, but that has become something I've realized I always wanted of ours, talking about movies. The reason I wanted movies is because movies are like something that, depending upon when you first visit it and what it is in your life, it tells something about who you are as a person.
Yes.
It either connected with something that you are as a person or made something in you about who you are as a person. And very much the same you're talking about. Some of those movies that are that case for me, and I'm sure for everyone, are not objectively good films, but there's still something there to love about them. And that's another thing that when I first took like my first class for film intro, whatever, in college, realizing that, even these other movies that are not great, maybe there's a particularly good actor, or maybe there's some really good cinematography. And so like even some of the worst movies, there's these kernels of something to love. And if you have a personal story with it, then even more so the case. So.
Yeah, I will say we watch movies that I probably would never watch. That's the whole point of this podcast. But like we go on with guests too, and they pick these movies and I'm like, I'm about to go in on this movie. I didn't love it. and then I hear their story behind it. I'm like, ah, shit. How can I not love this? It like opens up a whole new world and like new connections. So I don't read comic books, but maybe if I started, we could all connect on that. I don't know.
I keep trying. I got her to read 1 volume of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl from start to finish.
Yay!
Unbeatable Squirrel Girl, is that her name?
That's the full title of the one that you read, yes.
I think, you know, comics are like movies where it's just
it's a medium.
It's a delivery system for story. And so you just got to find the types of stories that really speak to you. But sometimes it can be so darn challenging.
Yeah.
But, you know, you mentioned a couple things there, Nick, that just like sparked my imagination. And it's just that, you know, you say, you know, there's usually something in any movie that's worth discussing, even like the bad, quote unquote, bad movies. There's a kernel in there that's pretty darn good. And like when I was a kid, and I think when most people were children and they would read a book or read a comic or watch a movie, it just was what it was. You would watch The Monster Squad, or you would watch what's another kid's film that you love? Hook.
Yeah, I love Hook.
You would watch Hook, and you would just accept it as is. Like, that's what a movie is. Obviously, it's great. And somewhere in your development, you discover things that are not to your liking, that are bad, and you become critical. And I've always tried to get back to that place.
Yes.
Where what I was watching was a good time. And I think I'm almost there, where you can present anything in front of me and I will find something in it worth celebrating for the most part. You know,
I'm also of the opinion that objectivism is just a lie. When you're talking about a story, you're talking about yourself. If you're talking about whether you enjoyed something or not, you're talking about yourself. And I think that I think that thinking that your opinion is like that you can have an objective opinion about a movie, I think that's really a really quick pathway to toxicity.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to realize, like, not every story is for every person, but every person can find themselves in every story.
And a challenge for me has been removing this sort of elitism that I used to have, where I would speak from absolutes about some, you know, if I liked something, I would speak in a way that would communicate to other people, if you didn't like it the way that I liked it, that you were an idiot.
Yes.
And that's not the case. You know, we all come to movies with different contexts and different life experiences, obviously. And every movie, every comic is somebody's favorite. And I remember being at Barnes & Noble one day as a music manager, and a customer said, I really hope you have my favorite film. I'm dying to see it. I need to see it today. I really hope you have it. And I was like, oh, your favorite film, what is it? And they're like, Norbit. And I was like, Norbit? Norbit's your favorite film? And they're like, yes. And I was like, okay, let's see if we've got it. And we did. And my mind was kind of blown that somebody could say that Norbit.
I think it was Norbit. You're talking about the Eddie Murphy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And that blew my mind that somebody was like, Norbit is my favorite movie. And that like also opened my mind.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I talk about films that I don't like, I try to remove this point of view of, if, you know, obviously this is trash and anyone who thinks of it as good is an idiot. And I try to remove judgments on the creators as well.
Yes.
Sure.
You know, where you'll say like, you know, Eddie Murphy really, you know,
phoned it in.
He slept through that performance. You don't know that. You don't know how he got to that performance.
Yeah.
So you can't really say that somebody phoned something in, because you're not living inside their body as they are making the film.
Yes. And I feel like sometimes these things happen serendipitously, and I apologize, I have to nerd out. I just happened to be lecturing on what's called fundamental attribution error within social psychology, and it is this mistake that we are primed to make because of actor observer bias, where it's like, you always, when you're looking at someone else, are like, it's dispositional is the reason why they're doing this, but when you're looking at yourself, it's situational. It's that every single one of us has this propensity to do that. But exactly, you're like, oh, this movie was garbage, oh, that person must not have cared. No, that person may have, for all you know, poured their heart and soul into it, but XYZ thing happened, you know, that prevented it from being maybe as good as you wanted it to be. So
yeah, there are so many factors that go into making a piece of art, and trying to figure that out and to be a scientist about it.
yeah.
No. Good luck.
So I'm loving this conversation, and I will say, like, just as a quick plug, because it fits here, I apologize. There's always those movies, all right? Spider-Man 3 is one of those movies for some people. We're going to discuss it in the second half of our podcast. We also recently, listeners may know, Lauren, a past guest. If you go to our Patreon, Lauren and I will have just covered the Super Mario Brothers, not the 2023, but the 1993 movie, which is also very much one of those movies that, plot, genuine character development, meaningful story beats, maybe not so much. Still
Sentient
a fun movie
slime.
for me. Yes, very much there. So go check that out. But before we move on to our movie discussion, I have at least one question that I know I specifically wanted to get out with you, because we often ask our guests about fights. But having listened to a lot of your back catalog and then more recent episodes, I can specifically remember one of the things that I tweeted at you all about was like, ooh, you say that you're someone who doesn't have fights, but I was still listening in the 2018, 2019 days. I can't wait to see where this goes. And on a more recent episode, I believe it was Brad admitted that perhaps your only real fights now happen around the creative space that you generate together. So I'm curious, is that still the case? Do you not fight over anything but the podcast? And what's sort of like the worst fight that you've had that you're willing to share with us?
Or how do you navigate those fights?
And that's what I was going to say next. How do you get past them?
So one of the things besides the podcast that we fight about is that I have like a lot of social anxiety. I have a ton of social anxiety. So a lot of times after I've been socializing, I come back and I'm like a paranoid freak. And and I start like hyper analyzing everything that I said and everything that Brad said, and
it will probably happen after this podcast.
A lot of times I'll come back and I'll go like, Brad, when we were talking to so-and-so, I didn't feel supported because I said this thing, and then you said this thing that ran contrary to what I was expecting you to say. And so now I'm angry at you. Like that's a huge one for us, besides everything.
I do, I would love to go back and listen to that 2018 episode. Was it in the X-Men where I was like, we don't really have fights? Because that was probably a lie. Okay. It was probably a little bit of a lie.
What we don't have is what we don't have really is shouting matches. Like it turns to like crying for me personally. Like I can cry on a dime.
I do think that we learned to fight over the course of making this podcast, because the podcast does bring out this beast in me and a beast in her, where we have an idea of how this conversation is going to go, or how we want to approach a topic, or how we want to edit there's so many like creative factors that go into the podcast. And we have, I think, fought more than we've ever fought during these last couple of years, during these last almost 5 years of the podcast, than we did before it.
Okay.
But none of those fights turn poisonous.
Yeah, none of the fights are like, and maybe we shouldn't be together.
Yeah, and when we're having the fights, I'm never thinking like, you know what, maybe this just isn't working. Because we had, a decade plus of a relationship before the podcast ever happened. Like that decade going into the podcast helped us, trust each other in those more creative arguments.
Yeah. I think the podcast is something that we're like both super passionate about, and we're both control freaks in our own way.
But the biggest fight we ever had happened before the podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh.
And it was comic book related.
It
was. Lisa started a graphic novel book club many moons ago. And we haven't done a book club in like probably 5 years since the podcast started.
It was started because I was living in an apartment full of comic books, and I felt like I really wanted to be more active in reading them. So I thought if I started a graphic novel book club with other people who didn't really read comics, that maybe we'd start making our way through some of these volumes.
And that book club lasted for about 8 years until Alan Moore's From Hell ruined it all.
Yeah.
Which was my selection for that month, and I killed the book club. That's how I interpreted it. From Hell's a masterpiece, though. No, that was not the fight. The fight happened somewhere in the middle. I'm guessing 4 years in, 3 years in. And it was the book club that was focused on Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples' Saga, which is a comic book series that both Lisa and I love. But we had one individual who I will not name.
How thoughtful of us. Protect someone's privacy.
Who really disliked the book. And, you know, Saga is one of those comics that, for the most part, is universally praised.
Yeah.
It's hard to find people who come out against Saga. Although, having read Saga now, I could see why a lot of people wouldn't like that comic, right?
Sure.
But within this group, it felt like a very Saga-loving group, except this one individual. And this one individual expressed why they didn't like the comic. And I chose to defend that person, even though I love the comic. And so I was taking that person's side and playing a little bit of devil's advocate with the group. And we had this 2-hour, 3-hour book club. And it was, I thought, a great conversation. I thought we all stated our things, and everyone left the book club. It was being held at our apartment, except for this individual who didn't like the comic, who I defended righteously as a devil's advocate. And I don't really remember all the details, and it's good that I don't remember all the details.
Right.
But suddenly Lisa was pissed at me.
Yeah, because I felt that by supporting this other person who shall remain bleepless. No, not bleepless. You're bleeping him out.
Bleepful.
Brad was being disingenuous and not supporting me and what we had previously discussed. So, like, as an introvert, I avoid genuine conversations at every cost. So in anticipation for doing our book club, I would take a ton of notes. I would be the one who would make the discussion questions, and they would be based on the things that I wanted to say. And so when Brad doesn't go to the script that I have in my head, then clearly he's the bad guy.
I'm a liar.
Yeah. So
so we started to have an argument.
Yeah.
In the apartment with our friend
right in front of him.
They are just observing Brad and Lisa screaming at each other. It's the only time that we've really screamed at each other for a long time, like
in front of another person,
in front of any other people. Like, we do get heated, so we are shouters. I'm a shouter, but this
I'm
was
crying.
like,
I feel like when you're crying, if you're crying while you're shouting, it doesn't count as shouting.
But this was so mad, and then Lisa
shout just to get through it.
Yeah,
she shut the door. And I was livid. And then I had to drive him home.
Yeah, but what did you do when you were livid? Are we
going to tell that part too?
Yeah, because
I threw a glass across the apartment.
And he hit the TV.
And I broke my television.
It wasn't a glass, though. It was plastic.
No.
It was a plastic glass. And I threw it against the wall, and because it's plastic, it bounced and went right into my flat screen TV.
Oh, no.
And scratched it. It didn't break it, but it scratched it. And then we didn't replace that TV for like a year. So I would look at this TV, and every time I looked at this TV, I saw this scratch on it. I knew that scratch represented me at my worst, and that it was mocking me, it was shaming me, and we eventually replaced that television.
Yeah.
It was a great day to finally replace that television.
But
I'm like deeply ashamed at how upset I got, and that I let myself get to a point where I acted out physically, and I'm so ashamed that I did it in front of that person.
Yeah.
You know?
But I mean, I think that just showed like the immaturity that was still in our relationship.
Yeah, that was like a decade ago.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, about 4 years into our, it was about 4 years into our marriage around then.
Yeah, immaturity, I think, not only in your relationship, but maybe in your person, Brad, because I'm someone who's struggled with expressing anger, especially expressing anger physically, and Danielle has helped me a lot with that and helping me to see how I appear through her eyes and those moments. But yeah, I'm pretty ashamed of having punched and maybe dented
our car
signs, and then I was gonna say there's still dents on the car because I basically, you know how like in comics Hulk smash and then you sort of like there's these two fist dents. There's two of those on the roof of my blue car that we still have. So every time I get into it, I have to have that reminder that you're talking about.
Well, I was that kid who would punch the wall, who would punch their locker. You know, like every locker I had in high school had like my fist imprint in it because I would get mad at some point.
That is called sorry, let me just stop you. Toxic masculinity.
Yes, yes, it sure is. It really, really is.
Which might be a theme of our upcoming discussion.
That is just the way that like society was back in the day, the way y'all were raised. And I'm so glad that it's not like that anymore. We're in therapy.
But it is something that to this day, you know, I'm working on. And I think that right now, the moments I get close to that, I hopefully will never get that close ever again. But the moments I get close to that is when we're recording and I'm trying to say something and I'll stumble over my word. And I'll hit stop. I'm like, I'm going to do that fucking sentence again. and then I'll do the sentence again. And then I'll stumble over the same spot. And then I'll do it again. And I'll stumble over that same spot. And I'll be like, oh.
The thing that really broke it for us is, one of our very close neighbors, because we live in an apartment complex, got a Nest camera. And the Nest camera, as everyone knows, records with audio everything that happens outside the door. And so I thought about it. I'm like, can they, if someone was to go buy the Nest camera while we are recording, would they be able to hear Brad
just scream fuck
swearing into the microphone? I wish that fuck was the worst word that he says. His mom is British. So we went outside while we were recording one of our Sweatpants Mode Patreon podcasts to see if what was yelled in here could be audibly heard outside the apartment, and yes it can.
And so for the last 4 months, for the last 4 months I have been really working on not shouting and getting mad while I am podcasting.
Smile, you're on candid camera.
It just took Big Brother to calm you down.
That's right.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't want to like get I don't want to get like too in the weeds here because I know we have like a timeline and we have business that we want to do. But I was watching a Hollywood Reporter roundtable discussion during the Academy Awards. And it was for people, it wasn't everyone who was nominated for Best Actress, but it was people before the nominations came out that they thought were going to be nominated for Best Actress. So you had like Jennifer Lawrence was there and Daniel Detweiler was there and a bunch of people. And Jennifer Lawrence was talking about, the cliche of, don't let your, women are too emotional and they let that get in the way of, whatever. And she says, I worked with Bryan Singer. If you want to know what an emotional person is, the worst tantrums I've ever seen were from Bryan Singer. And I heard that and I went, oh, is that what I do on the podcast? Do I throw tantrums on the podcast? Is that toxic masculinity? And then Lisa and I had like a conversation, I think on the phone or maybe on one of our walks. And I was like, Lisa, I think that's toxic masculinity. And Lisa goes, no shit.
This is just dawning on you now. That's
I too suffer from it apparently.
You too, as a white man. How do you all navigate when things come up like that?
Yeah.
Generally, it takes all day. So, like, if we're recording, it's not unusual for when we get heated for us to stop and talk it out and go. And we mentioned going on a walk. We mentioned going on a walk often because it is one of the ways that we kind of distract and distress. Like when our bodies are in motion and we're not making eye contact with each other, that's when we can kind of articulate ourselves a little bit more clearly. We get to take a little bit of time.
And we try not to, and I would say for the most part, we are successful in doing this, but we try not to go our separate ways without having discussed the frustration, the flare up, as we call them. And so, you know, I try not to go to bed angry. I try not to go to work angry. We try to talk it out. And that is something that I learned to do through our marriage because that was not my natural state. I'm a brooder. Again, my mom's English. She's a brooder. And I follow after her. And, you know, growing up, when my mom got mad, okay, well, the next time I would talk to my mom would be in like 2 days when she was, you know, more comfortable wanting to talk to me. And that's how I handled conflict initially when we got together. Is like, I'm just going to shut down and it's on her to deal with.
My parents also didn't fight. Like, I literally can't think of one time when my parents argued. But
you won't let me brood is the point.
I won't let him brood.
Yeah. And you've trained me not to brood.
Yeah.
I feel like I've never thought about the word brooding for it. But the way we've talked about it is Danielle needs time to process, whereas my way of processing is talking about it.
Yeah.
And in fact, the only way we found a decent middle ground where we've got some understanding and step points. But for me, frankly, I mean, brooding is the worst thing. If you leave me alone with my own thoughts and whatever negative things I have about myself or whatever thing I have made up is the negative thing Danielle or anyone else is thinking about me, that is the absolute worst case scenario because whatever's happening in my head is the darkest of the darkest things that can exist.
So you guys are essentially the mirror of us.
Yeah.
Where I am a catastrophizer. I am I'm anxiety hot, you know what I mean? I'm a worrier. And
left to your own devices, you will write a horror story.
Right.
Like what's going on in Brad and Lisa's relationship. Oh, it's a nightmare.
Right. Where also, like, when Brad is brooding, perhaps he is trying to solve the problem that we're having without me, which isn't fair. You know? So,
Brad's like, yes, that is exactly what's happening.
It's just a little passive aggressive, I think.
Yeah. Correct.
Well, good. Thank you. We appreciate your vulnerability on that. And, you know, I think our listeners always enjoy hearing how other people figure those things out.
Yeah, and it's nice to know, like, you did say we do fight. Like, I think, like you were saying, Lisa, maybe your parents didn't have, I don't know about that. Maybe I shouldn't say this about their marriage. I didn't have 2 parents. I just had 1. So I never saw any fights except for with herself. But, you know, I think we've talked about this too. If we have kids in the future, like, we would like them to see us fight, but also resolve that fight rather than just think that they don't happen. That's like scary.
Yeah.
I didn't see any fights growing up. And so like going into marriage, I'm like, we're fighting. This is the end, you know?
Yeah.
But we've learned to just figure it out, talk it out. And it's okay to like disagree. You got to live your rest of your life with this person. So
yeah,
you're going to disagree at least once.
I think you're going to disagree a lot.
And I just want to put one more button on the like psychologist in me needs to do this to point out things that I think both of us have articulated, but we haven't put a word to it. The feeling of commitment. Like you both have said that you had the many years before you had any real fights that it was like, well, we kind of just trusted that this was going to happen. Neither one of us really was like, oh, this might be the it. Danielle and I have had times where I think one or both of us has maybe said like we're having doubts or like, oh man, I don't see past this. I don't see how I'm going to. But even when you're like, I don't see how, there's never the question of if. It's like, it's the trust. It's that commitment that, like, I don't see the path, and that's scary as hell. But because I'm committed to you, I can get through this because I know that, like, I'm just confident and trusting that that's gonna happen.
Facts.
So, all right. Sorry to dictate what you all had said beautifully, but I figure we might as well put a nice pin in that to move on to our movie discussion. But before we tell people what that is, Brad, Lisa, we do have some people that I understand may only listen to the love half of the podcast. I don't know who that is, but just in case, why don't you tell our listeners that are just listening to this half, where can they find you?
Oh, you can find everything that we do at comicbookcouplescounseling.com. Our social media handle is CBCC Podcast. You can find that on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok, although we've never posted. We're going to.
Threatening to.
We're going to someday. Hive Social.
Yeah.
All those places, CBCC Podcast. My personal handle is @MouthDork. As a reference to In the Mouth of Darkness. I thought that handle was funny. And Lisa's personal handle is?
@Sidewalk Siren, which is what I came up with for my AOL account in middle school.
Love it.
I'm not afraid of commitment. I will pick a thing, and that's what I'm going to die with.
I love that so much and in so many ways. And so we've alluded to it, but tell us one more time where, after this quick brief break, what movie are we discussing?
We are going to talk about the Sam Raimi directed superhero film, Spider-Man 3.
Is there a semicolon? I mean, a colon?
That's a colon, not a semicolon. But I think
That would be fun, though, huh? Why don't we mix it up more with the punctuation?
Lisa did ask, like, well, what's after the 3? I was like, no, it's just Spider-Man 3. She's like, it's not like Spider-Man 3 Vengeance or
no subtitle.
No subtitle. No.
Wow.
I like a long title.
They used to do it just with the numbers back in the day.
Wow.
All right, so with that, we'll see you on the other side.
In love with movies.
And we're back. Welcome back, movie lovers. It's time to now discuss the movie half of our movie, and so we are going to be
The movie half of our movie.
movie half of our movie,
Our podcast.
movie half of our podcast about movies, and we're going to be discussing 2007's Spider-Man 3. That's the same Sam Raimi directed movie. He did all 3 of those. The Toby Macguire Spider-Man might be how you've heard it before. This is way back before the Tom Hollands and even before the Andrew Garfields.
He directed all 3 of the Toby Macguire?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Gullicksons, but Sam Raimi directed all 3.
Correct.
Wow. I didn't know. Sorry, keep going.
And if you watch them and you know Sam Raimi and his Sam Raimi isms, you can like see that in different elements of each of these 3 movies. But so it was also written by, I discovered, Ivan Raimi, who's I assume his brother, and someone named Alvin Sargent. But Sam Raimi is also a writer on it, so he likes doing his sort of written and directed stuff.
There were a lot of Raimi on the opening credits, and there was a girl Raimi. I don't remember her name.
Oh, do either of you know who the young woman Raimi? I don't know how young she is. She could be 90 years old producing
She's
this movie
probably
because she has all
born
the
very
money.
Nope, don't know the girl Raimi.
All right, sorry.
So Danielle's going to Google that while I then continue with our opening credits, movie lovers. Toby Macguire, this is the one. Kirsten Dunst plays MJ herself, Mary Jane. J.K. Simmons in the best role perhaps of his entire career, and that's saying something for J.K. Simmons. I really like him as J. Jonah Jameson. James Franco, Topher Grace, which I have thoughts about Topher Grace as Venom.
So
Thomas
good.
Hayden Church. Listeners may know Thomas Hayden Church from movies like Sideways, was a really good film that he was in. Danielle, you probably know him from George of the Jungle, way back.
Oh, I have notes about that.
Okay, good.
I said that's the bad guy from George of the Jungle.
You're absolutely right. That's
You
who that
can't
is.
like unsee that jawline, you know?
You're correct. Bryce Dallas Howard, which I was impressed Danielle did recognize, plays Gwen Stacy. And let's see, who else did I feel was noteworthy? Oh, Rosemary Harris deserves a shout out because I don't know that I've seen her in anything else, but she is my Aunt May. I have thoughts and feelings about that, but like she is, in my opinion, the Aunt May that we have. All right. Well, that's the opening credits that I have.
Flint's daughter is the kid from Kill Bill Volume 2.
Oh, yeah?
Really?
Yeah, the goldfish kid.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. See, this is why I say share any that you think of. I appreciate it.
And listeners, Lisa did print off IMDb.
I did, but not that deep, my friend. Not that deep. That's why I didn't name her by name.
She's just pulling that. She doesn't have the name in front of her. Yeah.
My bad.
Give her
Lisa
credit.
is 75 years old. She has printed out the internet.
Large text so I can see it.
Just like MapQuest back in the day.
That's what I was thinking.
Danielle's still scrolling, so I'll start with my well, I was going to start with my love story, but I guess we need to get to your
I can't find
Danny's
her.
Dingle. No, you're not going to find her? You
No.
good?
Yeah.
Okay. So, before we get to the love stories then, it's time for your summary of this entire film.
Okay.
Said very quickly. It's that favorite segment everybody has and hates.
Time for Danny's Dingle.
I like that you have jingles.
Man.
I don't think anyone hates this.
All right, just people don't love it. Okay. I actually wrote mine down this time.
No!
Because this movie did not stick in my head. Okay.
She couldn't remember it enough to improvise
I
it.
watched it yesterday. Spidey in college. MJ, an actress, failed. Escaped convict. Green Goblin Jr. Aunt May's ring. Sand experiment. Eric Foreman. Amnesia. Spidey, a tramp. MJ, a tramp. Black goo equals emo Spidey. Venom and Sandman and Goblin. Oh my! They're all defeated. Oh, spoiler alert. R.I.P. Harry. Always choose what is right. And they dance. The
I
end.
love that it was like a beat poem. That was
Yeah.
beautiful.
Should we do snaps? Because, you always snap at these poems.
Thank you so much.
Here I was. I introduced it as improvised, and you had to.
I know, the one time I wrote it down, you made me look like a fool.
Sorry, my bad, my bad.
So anyways.
So our love stories with this. Danielle, clearly, I think the fact that you had to write things down may betray a little bit of your love story with this movie. Why don't you tell the listeners what your story is with this film?
So this came out in 2007.
Sure did.
Don't get mad at me, guys. I was a freshman in high school, a sophomore in high school, I think.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah. So like as a 14-year-old girl, I was not like, ooh, Spider-Man. So I think maybe I saw it.
Okay.
That's it. There was vague flashes of when I was watching the movie. I was like, I've seen this.
And we couldn't decide whether it was she had seen that herself or I did a rewatch before the most recent Spider-Man where they all came back. And so she may have seen glimpses of it then.
I don't know.
My love story with this movie is not that impressive either. I know that it would have come out because I was looking May 4th, so it would have been the end of my freshman year of college. So I think I probably got a group of people together to go see it because I was still going to see a lot of movies and a lot of my high school friends. And I probably grabbed some guys from, fraternity or for college back in the day. The only other noteful thing that I had was I, for years, thought because I did not have a history with Gwen Stacy in the comics, I had Mary Jane from the animated series. And the animated series didn't really have a Gwen Stacy that was that big early on. Instead, there was Felicia Harding. So for years, I thought that the Gwen Stacy character played by Bryce Dallas Howard was actually them leading into what was going to be a Black Cat had they had a sequel. So, but our guests specifically picked this movie because they do have a far more interesting love story with this movie. So we're going to let them share that. Brad and Lisa, what is your story?
I'm going to go first.
You go
I'm going
first.
first.
I'm just going to take a break.
So, as mentioned before in our summary of our falling in love story, Brad saw Spider-Man 3 in Texas, but he did not tell me that.
That was actually my second time watching it.
That was his second time watching it.
I saw it first with Matt and Karen.
Oh, there you go. So, when he invited me on our first movie date, since he came back, well, first movie date ever after he had come back from California, he was leading me on to believe that we were watching Spider-Man 3 together for the first time. And so, and I was excited because I was like, hey, I've got a nerd boy. I'm doing a nerd boy thing. I'm going to a superhero movie. How fun. And as I was watching the movie, I started recognizing that perhaps it was trash. And so we walked out of the movie and I really laid into the film. And I was like, wow, that was terrible. Didn't you find it terrible both of us having watched it for the very first time? Don't we both agree? Weren't we having this shared experience?
Experiment and experience.
Experiment seeing a movie together.
I was having the experience.
I was having some attribution bias. We were having the same experience, so I presumed we were having the same feeling that we both hated this movie. And I found out years later that he had
years later. Like, I think I told you maybe a year later.
Yeah. That it was, in fact, his
Right,
third
that's
time
not much
seeing
better.
it.
That doesn't make you look.
Starting a relationship on a lie. Dang.
Like, you gotta go back to that time. You know, this is a year before Iron Man and the Dark Knight. Spider-Man 1 came out in 2002. I was in college. It was the movie, and is still the movie I have seen the most in a theater. That when I saw the first film, that was like at the height of my Spider-Man love. The Ultimate Comics version by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley. I just engaged so profoundly with that comic. And here was one of my favorite directors. I was an Evil Dead obsessive. I adored Sam Raimi. You know, Peter Jackson, the horror director, had just done the Lord of the Rings films, and now this horror director is doing the Spider-Man films. Like, my horror boys are finally doing it, getting mainstream attention. And I saw Spider-Man 11 times in the theater, thanks to a theater across from college that had $3 tickets for students. And I just kept going over and over and over and watching Spider-Man. And I collected all those tickets. And when I was living in my parents' basement at the time, I had this Spider-Man poster, and I would take a ticket and I'd put it in the frame. And I just lined up the frame with Spider-Man tickets.
Oh,
Loved Spider-Man 1. Spider-Man 2 comes out. What? Better than the first film?
Right.
How great is that? Oh my goodness. Love Spider-Man 2. 2007 rolls around. It's time to get Venom. Everyone loves
so
Venom.
Excited.
And I went to see it with my friends, Karen and Matt, and they eventually got married. I think it was Spider-Man 3's fault as well.
And they named their child Jonah.
Yeah, they named their child Jonah after JJJ. Yeah.
Yes.
wow.
Weird pick for a superhero name.
That's not the name I would give. You know, like I would like. Why am I judging their child? Okay,
More obscure. You know that you like. It's like, oh, it's this hidden nerd thing.
I think.
Yeah, but he's kind of a bad guy.
I think they want, like, Matt wanted to call the kid Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
Bruce Wayne Herms.
I
but
love
then
that.
got nixed.
Yeah.
Or that was Jeff's. I got a lot. Anyway,
we've got a lot of friends. We're very popular.
Obviously, we're bragging about all these names that we know. Saw Spider-Man 3, and when I saw Spider-Man 3, I was like, "Is this bad?" It was like that kid thing again. You know, you're like, movies can be bad. No. And then we leave for LA, and like I said, we wanted to go to Austin to go to the Alamo Drafthouse because we had heard so many big things about the Alamo Drafthouse. We get down to Austin, and the Alamo Theater we picked had two movies playing. It was Spider-Man 3 or Shrek the Third. Maybe it was Shrek the Second.
Ooh.
And I didn't.
Choice.
I mean, okay, I'm going to say something really that might offend people. I hate Shrek. So I'm sorry.
Ending now.
But I haven't watched it since the original, and so my feelings might be different. And hate's such a strong word. You shouldn't really hate anything, so maybe I'm wrong. Saw Spider-Man 3 at the Alamo Drafthouse. Had a burger while I watched it. That's the first time I'd ever had like a burger and watched a movie. They had a pre-show. How incredible was it? Movie was still bad, in my estimation. But now it's time to get serious. I'm going steady with Lisa. We're going to go to our first movie date. I don't think we officially said that we were steady. I don't think we ever used the word steady. But in my
I
head,
don't even know yet if we're steady. We're married.
In my head, we were going to start going steady. And it was starting with Spider-Man 3. And I, like, as a lonely child, only child, who had no girlfriends ever, the idea of taking a girl to see a Spider-Man movie, oh my God, is there anything more romantic? Even if that film is trash, let's watch Spider-Man 3 together. And that's why I begged Lisa to go see Spider-Man 3.
So I thought this podcast would be about, like, you know, sometimes a movie can be bad and you can still get a lot out of it. But as I was rewatching Spider-Man 3 to come on this podcast, I've really come around. I'm like, actually, Spider-Man 3 is kind of charming, and it's exactly what I want. Like, when I read a Spider-Man comic, I don't actually want it to be about the bad guys. I want it to be about Peter Parker learning to be a better person. And I was really just charmed by it.
Rewatching Spider-Man 3 this time, having been years since I've watched it, I was like, no, is this film actually good?
It's adorable. Wow. And I really enjoyed rewatching it. Thank you for creating a space where
I loved Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, so good.
I'm so glad to hear this. Okay, so here's been my experience. While you all were talking, it was reminding me, I didn't want to poo-poo it too much, but like, when I went to see this, might have been one of the first times where I saw a movie and it broke that child thing, Brad, that you're talking about, where I saw it and I was like, because I went and saw all the prequels, and after the fact started to realize, for example, Star Wars prequels, started to realize,
we know. When you say prequels, we know what you're talking about.
I know you do. Not every one of our listeners does. So I was like, oh, no, after the fact. But I remember walking out of the theater for Spider-Man 3, and just even then having, like, it dawned on me while I was watching that this was disappointing me. It was not living up to what I wanted. Having rewatched it this most recent time, I again was making notes of like, oh, there's some other parts of this that actually really do hold up. Like, I still have some very real complaints that I'm sure we will get to. But from the most recent time before this that I would have rewatched, it would have been right before the most recent Tom Holland Spider-Man. And I literally remember basically ignoring it because it was just on in the background while I was working on things. And I was like, I know this movie's trash. I'm just watching it to, like, have watched it again, quote, end quote.
I have a theory.
Okay.
As to why this movie is good.
Okay.
I was telling you this when we were watching it a little bit. I was like, I miss superhero movies where they just focus on the character. Like, no bangy multiverse, whatever, Marvel, do your thing. But I'm mad at Marvel nowadays because they have to make it 17 different characters to set up 17 other plots, to have all these colors and all these things, and it's just the superhero. Here it's just Toby, you know? He's conflicted. He wants to get married. He's not being a good boyfriend. And I think that, like you were saying, there's something charming about just like him living in his world. Oh, and also, I'm Spider-Man.
Yes.
He spends so little time in the suit.
Also, when he's in the suit, he doesn't wear his mask.
Yes. So I think what really benefited this watch was not watching 1 and 2 before it. Okay, so you're not doing the comparison
Compare and despair.
So just watching Spider-Man 3 on its own, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, this really is a character piece and a relationship drama in a way that a lot of blockbuster superhero stories are not right now. And I'm not going to compare and despair with those either. I'm a fan.
We're more Marvel fanboys through and through.
Yeah, like I can't not like them. It's just not in my DNA. But in watching this one, it really does stand out as like, look how much time is being invested in how these people are feeling.
Yes,
agreed. Even
sometimes Harry, for worse.
Yeah, there's a lot of time.
Maybe not
every single character.
Well, for worse only in that there may have been better ways to communicate Peter's feelings than a Saturday Night Fever-esque.
Do you know what though? Like what I found, like the aspect that I focused on about the symbiote idea and the symbiote suit is like the dance man was inside Peter the whole time. Like the symbiote takes your characteristics and exaggerates them. And I think that it makes sense that deep down inside, Spider-Man is a bit of a song and dance man.
And this is the
and he's brilliant
about
I'm
that scene.
This.
That scene is super cringe, right?
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot in Spider-Man 3 that's cringe. There's actually a lot in Spider-Man 1 and 2 that's cringe. But cringe kind of belongs in a Peter Parker story. And when you go back and you read your favorite Spider-Man stories, especially from the Lee Ditko era, and the Romita stuff, but even like, McFarlane and my personal favorite era of Spider-Man comics, still the 90s, Spectacular Spider-Man, the Buscema, J.M. DeMatteis era. Like, I love that. That's the new Goblin, Harry Goblin stuff. I love it so much. The Child Within storyline, so good. But when you read those comics, they are uncomfortable a lot. And when you're making a Peter Parker story, there should be times when you're like, oh God.
Yeah. Why is he still thrusting?
Please don't do what you're doing. You should be saying at Peter Parker at multiple times throughout any Peter Parker story, please stop.
Yeah. I have a hot take for this movie.
Uh-oh.
I did say earlier, I felt the length a little bit, and it's because they set up so many backstories. Did Sandman have to be in this one? I feel like he could have been in a different movie, and you still had Harry and Spider-Man plus symbiote,
So my understanding of Spider-Man 3 is that Raimi wanted to do Sandman and Harry, and the Avi Arad, the Toy Biz people at Marvel, were like, you got to do Venom. Venom's the most popular character at the time. People still freaking love Venom. You got to bring Venom in. And it is maybe one story too many. I like what the symbiote story does for him. I don't know if I necessarily like the Venom side. Like, I don't think I need Topher Grace at all in this film.
But to me, like, I feel like the Venom suit exaggerating Peter's toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity. I have so much practice saying it, and yet I still mess it up. Is really what the film is about.
Yes, I agree. I agree. It's just that I wish we had held maybe the Venom stuff for the Spider-Man 4 that never happened.
I have that exact note.
And the Sandman stuff maybe isn't as neatly tied to Peter Parker's emotional story, but Thomas Hayden Church
so good
is the best actor in this movie.
Oh, 100%.
And I think
so good.
I think in terms of like the CGI,
really
so
good.
Artfully done. His first transformation sequence is practically like a ballet. It is so beautiful.
I literally wrote that down too, and I said that to Danielle as we were watching. I was like, the CG for the Venom goo, even from the moment that like the way they choose to just have it be an asteroid that apparently very serendipitously crashes very close to the two of them, and that's
it happens
without setting up the Spidey sense.
Yeah.
But it doesn't, because the Venom symbiote doesn't do that, Lisa. Even in the comics, it doesn't set up the spider sense.
But I'm saying like a meteorite would. What? Don't you think?
No, because
it's got all the goo in it.
It's purely goo.
I have a question about Sandman.
Okay,
so he's right. I understand his internal dilemma. Also, he didn't mean to kill Uncle Ben. All that. I love it. But when he's running away from the cops after like, we found him. What experiment was happening on the grounds of the jail that turned him into?
Well, clearly the sign posted was like, caution, particle physics happening.
In the Spider-Man universe, around every corner is a science experiment that will turn somebody into a villain.
Yes,
I was like,
I like that they were like, let's close the windows, never look out again.
But it's funny. So to be able to tie your Sandman comment to what I was saying, the sand does not look great.
It looks like I thought it was rock sand. Didn't I say it was rock sand?
I don't think the CG holds up that much. It kind of looks like old-timey CG. Somehow the Venom goo literally looks better than the more recent Venom, in my opinion.
I mean, I certainly agree with that second half. I like the sand, but I also recognize that it is of an era. And, the blue screen work in this movie is intense, and it really stands out. But I also kind of like the blue screen work.
I think despite it, the direction is so good.
Well, I mean, Sam Raimi's direction of the action in particular, that first attack on Spidey from Harry, when Peter Parker's on his little moped and then Green Goblin comes in, the staging of that battle is chef's kiss. It is way better than I gave it credit at the time. And I like
I think even the fight, like you can see the horror elements in the Sandman fight that takes place in the Metro Center, where he like smashes his face like against the train as it's going by. Like that's terrifying.
I feel like there was a lot more creative energy put into the staging of the Sandman attacks, the Sandman battles, and the Harry stuff than the Venom attacks.
Yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
I wrote down a couple of times, because this is Sam Raimi, that I wrote, okay, but drowning in sand is horrifying. Yeah. And then I do think Venom is scary. Like he's a very scary looking dude. And even when his like Venom comes off and it's Eric Foreman, his teeth are still messed up, which is really creepy.
Yeah, that was a touch.
But I wanted to go back to something we said earlier, how we didn't need Eric Foreman. What does this note say, Nick?
Why is Eric Foreman so hot in this?
It says, so hot though. I don't know. He did something for me where I
like a nerdy guy. I also find Topher Grace pretty cute.
Yeah, not in that 70s show, but in this, I was like, okay.
Even in that 70s show, I was like, yeah, you could get it. If I was
listeners,
a free
maybe
agent.
Thinking this. So I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Lisa. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I have the answer to why Danielle finds him hot.
Tell me.
He has the same frosted tips that Justin Timberlake had.
Damn.
That's the answer.
And that's why you find him hot in that 70s show, because he looks like the monkeys.
Yeah, that's right. I was like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Said a couple years earlier than that.
Fascinating. Yeah, okay.
But
yeah.
Brad, you were getting this, and I have this note at some point, because it really does feel like there was a lot of, I was even noticing more than the last time I would have watched it, how there is a lot of good character beats. And the thing that feels like it doesn't fit is the Venom story, because from the moment, and it's a really cool sequence when Harry's ripping the symbiote off of him and then it drips onto Eric Foreman. I now can't remember Topher Grace's name.
Eddie Brock.
Really cool, Eddie Brock.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
That's the other Venom.
Correct.
That is just Venom.
From that moment, it's like all of a sudden we're rushed. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden it feels like we're trying to cram in too much. And it really does feel exactly like you said. There was a studio note that said, no, you have to have Venom. And what could have been a plant for some future sequel that could have focused solely on Venom, and it would have been perfect, because it would have been like, oh, you have all this like coming from, Spider-Man 3, all the black suit, all the good stuff that comes, and why Venom was such a compelling character to begin with. And literally you could have had that same exact sequence and then just figure out a different way to have the final battle not involve him, and it would have been good.
I'm shocked. I think that the Venom character and the way he's
Eddie
presented,
Brock or the
Eddie
symbiote?
Brock, the symbiote.
Okay.
The symbiote specifically is the crux of the entire
I agree
premise
with
of the
I
film.
agree with that. What I'm saying is
Thank
the
you.
Eddie Brock stuff doesn't necessarily work for me.
Okay, so like the character of Eddie Brock. Well, I think that they had to have a reason why when Peter Parker is covered in symbiote, he presents one way, and Eddie Brock, when he is in the symbiote, presents a different way. It's because he is so much more of a dick than Peter Parker. Like Peter Parker is a good guy. So when
I've got the solve.
Okay.
I know how to fix this. We throw one more hour onto the film. Okay.
There we go.
One more hour, and then we have more space for Eddie Brock to really develop and lead into a more exciting action sequence at the end.
Yeah.
So one more hour. That's
the
my
thesis
note.
statement of the film happens in the scene with Aunt May when Peter Parker is getting ready to propose to Mary Jane, and Aunt May says, in order to be married, to be ready to be married, you have to be understanding and you have to be able to put your wife first.
Yeah.
Are you ready to do that? And he said, yeah, I think so.
Uh-huh.
And then he is taken over by the symbiote, and all of these toxic properties start expressing themselves, and he realizes that in actuality, he still wants to be the center of his universe.
Yes.
And he is not, in fact, ready.
Yeah, and he loves being Spider-Man, and he loves the attention that Spider-Man is now getting.
And then
he kissed he let the girl kiss him.
yeah.
Little tramp.
Yeah. And so when finally he sees Eddie Brock in the symbiote, and Eddie Brock says, and he tells Eddie, like, the suit is going to turn you into a bad person. And Eddie Brock says, I like myself being bad.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer being a bad person because it makes me happy, right? It's in seeing that toxicity that makes Peter Parker realize that it is so ugly to be the center of your universe. You are unlovable. You are not good. You are a bad person when you are the center of your own universe. That's when he realizes, I am in fact ready to put another person first. Like, if any characters are expendable, it is the ones that Sam Raimi wanted to do in the first place. Well, not Harry. Harry was also necessary. The Sandman guy could have gone.
But he's so good.
He is so good, but like he doesn't add to that thesis statement.
So one more hour.
Yeah, one more hour.
Or we remove Thomas Hayden Church.
Yeah.
One more hour. I choose one more hour.
Never sacrifice the church.
Two things I have to say as you all were talking about. So for one thing, you floored me, Lisa. You made the case. I now agree. You're with the movie that was presented and the thesis and the importance of like what the movie is trying to communicate. You're absolutely right that it is that statement, and that is the moment with Topher Grace is when he learns that lesson and when that switch is flipped. So you've sold me. You're absolutely right. I think that is necessary. I was, okay, we could have the symbiote suit without Topher Grace. Now I see why we have to have Topher Grace. I also noted, though, that as long as this movie may have felt to some of us some of the time, 2 hours and 19 minutes, this movie, if it were made today, would have been closer to 3 hours anyhow.
Oh, it would be 3 hours.
Like, yeah.
Easy.
So that's really fascinating too, is it's like for what they did with the number of characters they had and the amount of actual character development that occurred for all but Eddie Brock. Because Eddie Brock, as much as I agree with all of what you just said, he's still just the MacGuffin then for Peter to learn that lesson. Like, he's the thing, not a person, really.
So then why didn't they Sandman save Venom for later? Because at the end, Sandman's not a bad guy either. And like Peter Parker realizes that because he's like, I forgive you. Like, that's like a huge thing and a huge turning point for him too.
And that's what I was going to say. Is I think the other piece I was going to say to what Lisa was saying, I think there's unfortunately almost two like theses, and that's where things get confused and muddled, and why it's not the best. Maybe there's portions of the movie that could have been improved, because it is this sort of lesson of not, there's good in everyone kind of thing. Being presented with the Sandman story, but then the romance and his relationship with Mary Jane is only made possible to get stronger through everything you were saying that would not have come in any way that I can think of through Sandman.
Kirsten Dunst also killing it in this movie.
Yeah.
I think she's really, really good in it. James Franco, less so, but I love everything with Harry in the movie.
Yeah. There's something about James Franco and the way he presents Harry Osborn where it's so menacing, even when he's trying to be like the good Harry. Like, I'm just like, oh, you give me the creeps.
The dance in the kitchen scene is wretched. But I also kind of love it because, again, it goes to that cringe factor of like, we need and
he could actually fold an omelet, which I think is pretty impressive.
It's
pretty sexy,
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah. And I love Harry and his dad. Sorry, Harry and Norman, and that lives in his head, and Willem Dafoe getting to come back and play that version of Norman, the nightmare version. Oh, so good.
There's so many internal conflicts happening in this movie. Hot take on Kirsten Dunst / MJ. I didn't like her. I didn't like her in this movie.
That's fair.
A couple of times she just kept saying, I feel like if Peter Parker was toxic masculinity, she was basic like,
Yeah,
what is the word I'm looking for? Not bitch, but you know, like the understanding of a woman's role. Because she kept saying like, tell me you love me. Tell me I'm great. And I didn't see anything. I'm like, maybe you should show that he should love you. And I understand it's to show that Peter Parker's not paying attention to her.
Yeah,
but
she
I don't know.
becomes when he makes the mistake of not listening, and she goes like, well, if you're not going to listen to me, I'm just going to withhold and resent.
I love the moment where she has gotten bad news about her job, and it is devastating. It is absolutely crushing. And what he's doing is something that I recognize that I sometimes do. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. We can fix this. We can fix this.
I've clearly gone through something similar.
Yeah.
And I'm a national icon. Therefore, I am an authority figure.
Yeah, I know what it's like because of all these people taking photos of me. And like, it is such a bonehead position to take. But I also feel like that scene is really, really genuine. And I think Kirsten Dunst, when I say she's great in this movie, I'm really thinking of that scene. I think she sells that scene, that disappointment, that despair that she is feeling as an actor who is failing or is being told that she is failing. I really, really like it. I think she's also a prop for most of this film.
Yeah,
and Mary Jane has been a prop in these movies since the first film.
I have to say though, her 2 singing scenes, like as a singer, I really appreciate like where the show that she was cast in, where she was singing that It's Wonderful and she's descending the stairs. I can see why she got bad reviews. That did not feature her voice in a flattering way at all. And then when later she was singing in a different context, doing a different genre of music, she sounded great. Like it's like, you know, sometimes you have a talent, but your talent being featured in the wrong format is not going to shine. Like she had realized, I do like to be seen and heard. I do feel like I want to perform. Now I have to find the format. Not that I'm saying that she doesn't deserve to be on a huge stage, but she doesn't deserve, like, that was not her piece. Yeah. You know?
Is that her actual singing voice?
That is her actual singing voice.
Wow.
It is pre-recorded and she's lip syncing, but that is her real singing voice.
Now,
that's impressive.
How do we feel about Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen Stacy?
She cute.
I think she would have made a better Felicia Harding.
I mean, I don't think, like, I didn't see her present, like, in that context, Gwen Stacy was like just a name. It really, she wasn't really being Gwen Stacy.
The model shoot scene in the skyscraper, that model shoot scene is quite comical. It's like Sam Raimi's idea of what a model shoot scene might look like. But then when the girder comes in, and it's a big CGI girder, but I like the way that they shoot the girder crashing in and then her diving towards camera POV. But yeah, I was not sold on her abilities as a model or on that photographer's abilities as a photographer.
Or her ability. There was one point where I looked over at you. I was like, she's not even trying to hang on. Like she was just kind of just leaning. I was like, that is very unrealistic.
I think if anybody really got the short shrift in this screenplay, it's the Gwen Stacy character. She's really just there to ignite a conversation between Peter and MJ. Mm-hmm. And as a fan of Gwen Stacy, you almost wish that it was just another person. Don't make that character Gwen Stacy.
But I do think
just make it any other and generic.
Anybody.
But like in terms of the toxic masculinity, I'm the center of the universe context, like him enjoying her crush on him and keeping that part like and not ever going like, oh hey, I've got this lab partner who's like really hot, it's really, and going like, okay, that's going to be part of my private narrative that I keep separate for Mary Jane. Like, I don't think that you need to tell your partner everything. Like, you know, but at the same time, like if you ever have a hot lab partner, you're obliged to tell me. I'm gonna be super angry, super publicly at a French restaurant.
I'll tell you about all my lab partners.
Yeah.
And their level of attractiveness.
Yay!
I agree with you though. I think I wrote down at one point, like, as a couple, Peter Parker and Mary Jane have very poor communication skills.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't share what she's going through either with him. He obviously doesn't make it easy, but like, she should still be sharing, hey, this was a horrible time. I had a horrible day, and literally, like, my dream job is gone and was ripped from me.
And she also has this traumatic past with her family and with her father. And it's painful for her to talk about. And so that idea of bringing it up to have it immediately shut down, like, you know, it's scary to talk about in the first place. And
then rejected.
And immediately rejected. Yeah.
Yeah, I had the thought during those scenes. I've turned to Danielle. I've literally done exactly that to you, where I'm like, I think I'm commiserating. I think I'm relating. I think I'm saying I know what you're going through, but essentially all I'm saying is like, yeah, this thing's no big deal. I've totally done exactly that same thing, as opposed to
let me tell you my story.
Yeah.
But this is where we were talking about earlier. It's nice to have the movies, to have the story, to have our reaction to the story, and be like, we communicate better than that, or like, to be like, this is an instance where, like, you guys do this through comic books, like, this is where they should communicate, or this is where we, you know, as a couple, this is what should happen. So I think it was a very good conversation piece and think piece to be like, y'all are not talking to each other. Both of you need to let something go and just listen to the other person.
Like, I think that oh, you go ahead.
No, by all means, Lisa. I was about to change gears, so please.
Oh, I just think that Aunt May saying, like, you know, as the husband, it's the man's role to always put his wife first. I think that is half of the truth.
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you find someone that you want to be with, you love them so much that you're willing to let them be the center of your universe, but they should also love you so much that they want the same thing for you, you know, where
we got it.
It's just, where like, you're kind of passing that baton of, like, it's like a little dance of passing that baton back and forth of who is the center of the universe. And it's just that kind of back and forth that keeps a relationship spinning. Yeah.
Yeah, and then occasionally, and I think you all have talked about this on your podcast too, and something that it's enlightened me with some of the books that I've read of like, there's a third person who that gets passed to, and the third person is not some other thing, but the third is the relationship. There's the you, there's the me, and then there's the us.
Yeah, that's an Esther Perel idea.
Thank you.
Yeah,
see, I knew it was from you all's. See, listeners, this is why you should go listen to Comic Book Couple Counseling, because they have a whole episode about this. But it's, you know, that idea of there is this new united entity. But I think that Esperel, as you were saying, points out, like, there still needs to be the individuality, but that, like, at any given moment, both of you are allowing for one of those three entities to be the center of your world, and it is not always you. In fact, you are often trying to push to one of the other two.
Yeah, the true romance of a relationship is the coming apart and coming back together.
Yeah.
That's deep.
See?
What do you mean, see? Wait, I have a couple of serious notes.
Oh, can I get one other thing real quick that's not serious because it was related to Aunt May?
Mine's related to Aunt May too.
Okay.
Why did she not give him a box to put the ring in?
I know.
I had a very serious issue with that.
That's your serious note. So
he drops the ring once. Like, that can happen to anybody. He has the sticky web stuff. Why don't you sticky web it to your person?
Yeah.
Like, if you're flying through the air and you're holding a tiny ring, either stick it on your finger, right?
Yeah.
Or if it doesn't fit, just web it.
Yeah, create a little pouch.
Everything can be solved by webs.
Yeah.
Everything.
Okay, now you can go. That gave me anxiety the whole movie, that they're just walking around with the ring like this.
Sticks in his little pocket.
But then he gets in a fight and then it flies in the air, and it's a lot.
This
So
is just
good,
because
though,
Danielle
Chapter.
may or may not have lost some of the early jewelry that I got her, and she may or may not live with anxiety that she is going to lose other pieces of much more important jewelry that she now has. No, the MA thing I was going to say is, so that same exact conversation, I wrote this note down because there's scenes in the second movie that do this too, but I want to know you all's take. Does Aunt May know that he's Spider-Man? What do you think?
I think in the third film, it's implied through the performance that she does. I don't think that's necessarily there in the second film.
Okay.
And I don't know if I necessarily felt that way before this watch, but watching it this time, I felt like she did.
I don't know. If I thought that Brad was Spider-Man and he walked up to me and goes like, "Hey, Spider-Man killed a guy. Don't worry about it." I wouldn't be like, "That doesn't sound like Spider-Man." I would be like, "What the fuck did you just say to me? You killed a guy?" Yeah, I don't know. She should have been way more shocked, I think.
I mean, maybe, but also in the language of comic book movie melodrama,
right?
I feel like that's what's being communicated. That's how I read it. I think it's up for interpretation, obviously. So, but that's how I feel right now.
I didn't even consider it.
I lean the same way you do, Brad, and that's why I made the note, because I think there's also I remember a scene around her doing a yard sale or a garage sale or something like that, and there's like another similar kind of beat where she's giving these pearls of wisdom, but it's like sort of delivered with this like, know what I'm saying, people?
Yeah.
I didn't rewatch the first two.
Nod.
Yeah, Rosemary Harris is really good also.
Yeah.
Give her flowers.
Yeah.
So good.
When I think Aunt May, I do think an elderly woman. I don't usually think of a hot Aunt May.
Tomei.
Yeah, I don't Tomei. I love Marissa Tomei, and I like that interpretation of the character.
Agreed. I was gonna say the same thing. Marissa Tomei can't go wrong, but also that fit for that stuff. It's not necessarily my Aunt May. Did you have anything else that you needed to get off your chest since I interrupted?
One point that I laughed out loud was after he like is emo for a little bit, and then he's like, "It's time," and he just opens this box that he has that now has a black suit, and I'm like, where did this come from?
Yeah, and it really doesn't make sense because then later he has to peel it off of him as the symbiote. But apparently earlier on, it was just this suit. It was the symbiote was happy to stay as a fabric form for him.
But genuine question, and I don't read comic books. Is Venom affected by sound? Like, is that his weakness?
Yes, originally, yeah. Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four figured that all out for Peter Parker, and that Bell scene is similar to how it happened in the comics originally, except in the comics Eddie Brock wasn't just like below there.
Just chilling.
Got it. Okay, I didn't know that part, so I was like, how did he know? So weird.
All right.
Looking through all my notes. I feel bad that just Harry dies.
Sure.
Yeah.
He had he was coming back to being a nice guy, and his whole face got messed up, and then he died. It was sad.
That did feel
also
unnecessary.
Faster off camera from that giant bomb and scars than he did from having a bonk on the head, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah. I liked it. I like the Harry Osborn stuff much more than I remembered liking it.
Yeah, I liked it too. And then Eric Foreman also dies.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
He just sacrifices himself because he wants to be Venom.
Yeah. The death of Eddie Brock and Venom is wild to me. The way it's shot, there's something really off about it, comically off.
Yeah. But I like the difference between Harry's death and Eddie Brock's death is Eddie Brock literally was too douchey to live, where Harry, it's we better kill him before he takes back his character,
his art,
his growth.
Yeah.
His art. Final question, I guess, is
okay.
Well, I guess you know because you all read the comics. Do they get married? Do Spider-Man and Mary Jane?
Complicated.
I was just about to say.
Okay.
That's a whole other podcast.
I don't know the answer.
I will leave to Brad and Lisa to cover on theirs.
We
kind of did. The answer is yes and then no, but not. But they got unmarried. They got unmarried by the devil.
Yeah.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, where I expected that to go.
But also, it involves Doctor Strange.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
But it's
I'll explain
canon.
however much of that you want.
Or you can listen to the episode.
Off mic.
Okay.
But
I will do that.
Brad, Lisa, any other burning thoughts or questions you had?
So we didn't talk too much about the Daily Planet. We mentioned that J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is really great. I also love Bill Nunn as Robbie Robertson. And I really liked Elizabeth Banks as Betty Brant in this movie. And I would watch a whole Daily Planet film with this cast.
How fun would that be?
I could see that.
I like that idea a lot.
I have another Aunt May Pearl of Wisdom punch up that I have. So towards the end of the movie, as like her final like little gem that she passes on to Peter Parker, she says, I have it written down. She says, it's our choices that make us who we are. And you can always choose to do what's right. And I would amend that to say this. It's our choices that make us who we are. And we're not always going to choose to do what's right.
Ooh.
And like, because to me, like Brad and I, we talked about like the fights that we've had and the disagreements and, you know, the throwing the cup and all of that stuff. And those times that we made bad choices are also turning points that point us in the right direction so that we can find our better selves. And I think the faster you can realize in your personal development that you're going to screw up all of the time and you're going to do a million things that you wish you could take back. And you're going to be so embarrassed by the person who used to be. But like, as long as your intentions are good and you don't want to be that toxic guy where it's just like, you know what? I'm just going to do what makes me feel happy. And I don't care if it's selfish and I don't care if it's bad, you know, as long as you're not being that person, you know, like do the best that you can because you're going to screw it up.
To quote from another undisputed masterpiece, The Last Jedi, as Yoda says, failure is a teacher.
Yeah.
I love that. That is so beautiful that we're not going to try to top it in any means. We're going to instead cap this. We have to end with our heart ratings and our question of would you renew your vows? So
to this movie.
To each other. Brad doesn't believe in renewing vows.
Is that true?
Yeah, you've said that to me many times.
I've said that to you many times.
Yeah. He's like, once you've made a vow, you don't remember saying this? You're like, I don't like vow renewal ceremonies.
I had a stance on
You did.
vow.
You had a hot take on vows. And you're like, you make your vows one time.
I think that I'm always down for a party. And if we have to renew vows to get more gifts and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we do all of the shit that we got as wedding gifts is all broken.
It's all broken. You need a new bed.
Renew those registries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I mean,
weird.
I don't believe, I guess, hold on. I'm having like a flashback to like 16 years ago when we had this conversation, probably. I do not have a desire to renew my vows to you because I feel like those vows are still good.
They're still good. We don't need to re-up.
Yeah, I don't need to re-up. But I also think, well, who are we talking? We were talking about a love expert that was saying that periodically you do need to. Oh, it was Robert Kirkman. The love expert was Robert Kirkman, the creator of The Walking Dead, when he came on our podcast and he was talking about his relationship with his wife. And he was saying, when you're in a long relationship with your partner, you do sort of need to re-up or re-engage with the person across from you today, because the person you married is not necessarily the person that's in front of you. And I do think that that's true. I know that certainly, I hope that's true in my case, that I'm not the Brad that was Brad in 2007. You know. And I don't think you're the Lisa of 2007 either.
I don't even like her.
And so if you're trying to stay married to the Lisa of 2007, it's not going to work, guys.
Yeah. I saw a TikTok that said like you're gonna be married to 3 people in your life, and it's going to be the same person. It's just the different evolutions of that person. So
I hope there's more than 3 for me. Like many evolutions for Brad.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've heard you all say that on your podcast before too, and very much identify with it. I am not this. If you go back, listeners, if you're a new listener, maybe you found us because we had Brad and Lisa, and they're awesome, and that collected you over here. Go back and listen to the first episode of our show. I am not the same person that I was in the first episode of our show, let alone then the year before that when we got married, let alone the years before that when we first met. So
agreed.
Yeah.
Also, don't go back and listen to our first episodes.
It's crazy.
I have done it. It's really good, actually. If you like those characters, so good to go back and listen to. But coming back to Spider-Man 3. Coming back to Spider-Man 3. I'm going to go ahead and give it, I wrote down 4 out of 5 hearts.
Wow.
As I was rewatching it, I did actually be like, man, this really does, in fact, hold up pretty decently. So I'm dinging it for the things that we've already talked about, but 4 out of 5. I would renew my vows. I will give it a length of time, but I will watch this movie again before I leave this earth.
I'll give it 3.5 out of 5 hearts. Fine. It was enjoyable.
You can go lower. It's supposed to be the quote unquote objective score.
Yeah. I
don't believe in it.
Enjoyable. I'm glad that you guys made me watch this because who knows if I watched it before or not. Will I renew my vows? Nah.
Never
that's not
never
true.
Gonna need to
if
see
it's
it again.
on in our living room and I walk past it or I'm sitting in it, I'll watch it.
That's not you renewing your vows. You have no intention personally for you to ever watch this movie again. So that's okay. It's a no. You two, Brad, Lisa.
You can go first.
I was going to say, I want you to go
first.
first.
Okay. I can go first. I would give it 5 out of 5 hearts. I really enjoyed it. And now that we've watched it for you, you've become part of my story with Spider-Man 3, and I've had a really wonderful time. And I would totally watch Spider-Man 3 again. And I hope I have another take on it because I'm a different person.
Okay, 5 out of 5 hearts. Okay. What if this was on Letterboxd?
What if this was on Letterboxd?
Let's not say hearts.
I don't do Letterboxd. Because I don't like people knowing my thoughts.
But let's just say you were doing Letterboxd. Like, would you give it 5 stars? Is 5 stars the same as 5 hearts?
Oh, no. In stars.
Okay.
Stars are
Our
different.
hearts mean less.
I would go.
Okay.
I would go 3.5 though.
3.5 stars. Okay, 3.5 stars, 5 hearts.
Though.
Okay. All right. Then, using your metric, I will also give it 5 hearts.
5 hearts, so many
but
hearts.
On Letterboxd, at Mouthdork, you will find it rated 3.5 stars. I do have a tendency to be that like person online who's like, you know what? Star Wars Holiday Special is not as bad as you think it is. And so you got to take, my opinion with a grain of salt on anything really, because again, I'm trying to get back to that childlike state of loving everything again and not disliking anything. But I was shocked rewatching Spider-Man 3 at how much I enjoyed it and how I legitimately think it's a real good movie. So yeah, 3.5 stars for me, 5 hearts.
I feel like it really I feel like Sam Raimi did what he set out to do.
It's a universe.
It is a really complete thought of a film.
And what I am going to do, so I'm going to renew my vows and I'm going to go back and I will watch Spider-Man 1 and 2, but I am guessing that it is much more in tone with the first 2 movies than I initially gave it credit.
Sure.
And it's like when you go back and you watch Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, the Joel Schumacher Batmans, and you're like, oh, like as a kid, I was like, Batman Forever is so much better than Batman and Robin. And then you watch them and you're like, they're kind of the same. They're kind of the same. They're not that different, everybody. And I kind of like those movies too. So anyway.
We really like movies.
I like film.
It's good to like movies.
You can come back. We'll watch another movie. Maybe
How fun.
Spice World, since we were talking about this.
I've
Spice
never
World's great.
seen it.
I mean, if you all want to be on to watch Spice World, fantastic.
I love it.
But to like really pull everything together for me, I would love to talk for hours with you, Lisa, about everything, everywhere, all at once. So if you all are serious at all about coming on again, we could do both of those.
I love
to
that.
watch the movie again.
What
yeah.
a great
That's a
double
ride.
feature.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is my religion.
Movie.
We will have already done the love half, so we can just,
Yeah.
double up on the two different movies. But Lisa, Brad, one last time for our listeners, where can people find you? And gloriously talking about everything comic books and how there's different people, and you talking to Robert Kirkman and Invincible and all that.
I said it last time.
Well, we are at CBCC Podcast on Instagram and Twitter and all of the places. And then it's comicbookcouplescounseling.com. And you can find us on Spotify and iTunes.
All the
Plugs are
podcasts,
boring.
all the podcast places. We are currently covering Invincible.
That's right.
Mark and Eve. We're halfway through that podcast series. 2 more episodes to go.
And our self-help book for that is Permission to Feel by Dr. Mark Brackett. And I am really loving that book.
I thought it was Sam Brackett.
Sam Brackett? No, that's Sam Beckett. Quantum
Leap. I've been tweeting incorrectly.
Oh. I should never leave you in charge for too long.
I'll have to delete some tweets. Okay.
Well, apologies for that, but I'm sure Mark and Sam will be just fine with it. You can find us at the letter N Love with Movies. That's at N Love with Movies on every social media that you can find. You can find us on all the different places for podcasts as well as YouTube. Don't forget to, if you want to hear my thoughts with Lauren on other movies, you can find us on Patreon.
What's the name of that?
The tentative the title for that is Guy Love with Movies, because it's two guys having their love with movies. But then you can also find me at Nick Loves Movies, NICLUV Love, on all the social medias. Danny, what do you want to plug?
Miami 4. You can follow me at Insta. I post everything there.
Okay.
Come laugh at me at Second City.
Yay. That's so cool that you do that.
All right. I love you, Danny.
The real Chicago thing to do.
Very
Let them do
Chicago.
their outro.
Oh, well, I love
Do
you,
it again.
That has been so much fun. I love you, Danny.
I love you, Nick. And
we love you, Galaxians. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
We love you too, movie lovers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We did it!
If I watch that, then you have to watch Head, which is the Monkeys movie.
Okay.
I'd watch Head.
Yeah.
That is great.